Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. And last time that crazy curmudgeon nearly destroyed the world and treated me having to torture myself by playing what I considered one of the worst RPGs in my collection in order to save it. Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Now how did I get this piece of crap game? Well, several years ago, GameStop was clearancing out all their PlayStation 1 games, and I found this, and I decided, I don't have very many PlayStation 1 JRPGs. Why not give this a go? I also picked up Puzzle Fighter while I was out there, so it wasn't a complete waste of a trip to GameStop. Since it was a Japanese RPG, which are usually known to be quite long, I decided to hold off for a while until I could get time to get into an epic JRPG, and well, when I finally did, I was treated to this.
I know that you're out there and I'm waiting for you. Cornet is my
And then
name
went,
and
oh
I'm
my
not
god,
the
what did I buy?
with my
7 hours
friends
later,
and
just 7 hours, I had beaten the game, and not only did I feel like I needed an insulin booster, but also a huge amount of testosterone injected into me for the overdose of estrogen this game gave me. So let's take a look at a shoujo turn JRPG that's so bad it took me several years before I even tried to get into another shoujo anime. Let's take a look at Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Okay, before we get into the actual plot, let me explain something to you guys. I love musicals, at least when they're good, but they're very hard to set up right. There are about three main parts to a musical in my opinion. First, it has to have good music, obviously because it's a musical, but it also has to have great characters and a good plot because you have to care about what's going on in said musical, and the world has to be created around the music and characters so they can burst into song without making it seem like they're crazy, and all of these pieces have to fit together. Sometimes one element can be a little weaker if another is super strong to support it. A good case would be Frozen, as there are many problems with the main stories, but it's got a good world and a really great soundtrack. But if one completely sucks and is out of place, it can derail all the other two, regardless of how strong they are. A good example of this is Chicago, which has a good soundtrack and a lot of great songs, and the worlds which they are sung in are in the characters' heads, so they're not really singing them in the real world, and it creates a whole bunch of interesting ideas. Unfortunately, I spent the majority of my time watching that movie, not enjoying any of these things, but rather wishing I could reach through the screen and choke the life out of the main character for being such a heartless biddy. If you're wondering what parts Rhapsody gets right, the answer is none of them! The music sucks, the world is not well presented, and the story and the characters aren't very well developed or interesting, with the exception of one character and song, but only towards the end. In fact, you have to play through about 6 out of 7 hours before you even reach that point. The songs, while not poorly sung, aren't that pleasant to listen to. They're just there for the most part to be there. They don't really benefit the plot or the characters at all. The world here isn't very well developed, as you can see by the graphics, and with the exception of one part where the music actually did its job, I was never touched by the characters or their problems in this game. Rather, I was just going through the steps in order to beat the game. None of the story interested me. Okay, so let's actually take a look at the plot of this stinker. Rhapsody can be divided into two acts. The first act has Cornet while she's out strolling through the forest with her friend, a talking puppet named Kululu or Karuru. I'm willing to bet that is really supposed to be Kululu, and it's another case of Japanese translations, not taking account that L and R sounds are very similar in Japanese. Anyways, they are rescued by a prince after she runs into some bad guys, who's so handsome that she immediately falls in love with him. Oh, wait, I think I've seen this fellow before. Oh, I remember where it was in Arnold's official President of California's dictionary. Oh, here we go. It's under the definition of Girlymon. Girlymon, a member of the California State Legislature. Also, see this guy. Anyways, wanting a chance to meet him, she decides to enter the Miss Marl Kingdom's beauty pageant, where she has to beat her rival Itoli here in order to win the prince's affection. The second act gets a little bit more interesting after she wins the contest. An incompetent witch named Marjoli breaks in and accidentally turns the prince to stone while trying to kidnap him. Cornet decides to travel across the world and collect the magic gemstones needed to bring her true love back to life. And by true love, I mean the guy she barely bumped into the forest and danced with for like 2 minutes. It's stupid and even aggravating, and again, the songs add in nothing to this adventure. Don't get me wrong, props on being the only game I know of that really actually does this kind of things, but the songs for the most part add in nothing. That said, as much as I like to poke fun at this game, and for a good reason, it does have one small part and one song that does work and does its job well, and that is when we do find the origins of Cornet's talking puppet, Kululu, during the end of the game. It takes us 6 hours of listening to songs that make my ears bleed for one to do its job, and only one. Ugh. I guess I should add in there is one other good thing, and the game does have a sense of humor from time to time and even breaks the fourth wall. The jokes can give me a small chuckle, but again, very few and far between. The rest of the time, I kind of just sat there dull and almost lifeless. Well, I guess in a lot of ways, games are kind of like musical. Sometimes a bad story, even in a narrative-focused JRPG, can be saved by its gameplay. Is it the same here? The answer is hell no! The gameplay sucks too. Remember how I said the game had 2 acts in it? Yeah, the first act is the most frustrating and slow start to a JRPG that I have played through that's not titled Kingdom Hearts 2. There are only 3 areas that you will be allowed to explore in the first act, and you will have to track between them a lot. These areas are the woods, Cornet's hometown, and this huge city, and get used to them, especially the woods, as you will be asked to come back to this area a lot. After the prince gets stoned, though, the game opens up and you can explore the rest of the world and partake in some dungeons. And oh boy, these are some of the worst dungeons I have ever seen. Basically, they're just color swapped from each other and then cut and pasted together. That's not how you make a proper dungeon. Now, if you're trying to do anything that makes an impression on the player, these dungeons suck. There's only one dungeon that is the exception to this rule, a sunken ship, but it's pretty much aimed for the captain quarters in a linear path. And I could forget this if this was, say, a first generation Super Nintendo game or maybe a first generation PlayStation game with them trying to bring an RPG onto a completely new medium and system. But nope, this is from 2000, around the same time when games like Legend of Dragoon and Final Fantasy IX was released. How the hell can you be this lazy when you have that kind of competition? What about the battle and combat systems? Ugh. This game is one of the worst JRPGs ever when it comes to this. And I know what you're saying. How could this game be bad, Tommy? It looks like it's a real in-depth strategy JRPG. Oh, let me tell you how. Yeah, it's got the setup of a strategy RPG, but you know what makes a strategy RPG fun? You have to use strategy. This game, you really don't. Even the easiest of battles gets you a whole bucket full of gold and a lot of EXP for leveling your characters up to be OP in just a few rounds. So you go through battles with enemies missing, and if they are lucky enough to get a turn and hit you, they rarely do much damage. Rarely did I find myself with character dying. The only reasonably hard boss fight there is the very last one, and even that is a cakewalk. It's a cakewalk, that is, unless you make one huge mistake. That is actually switching out your puppets whenever you get a new one. Every time you get a new puppet, they start at level 1. What, how, and why? None of the characters really differ so much, and the game is so easy to just go through overpowered. Why penalize players for putting in new party members? You should be encouraging and rewarding players for using new party members and new setups, not penalizing them by making them weaker or have to grind more. This is stupid. As you can see, the game is a freaking mess of a video game, so why is it? I blame one thing and only one thing. It was because it was made for girls. Yeah, you heard me, but just hear me out for a moment. Back then, you didn't have all this data and statistics to show that women do play video games just as much as men, just different kind of games. Developers would often develop games that boys would like to play, then just throw in a more pinker shade of paint and then start dumbing it down to the nth degree. I saw this more or less with Capcom's The Little Mermaid, which I reviewed years ago. Why did they do this? Because the developers felt that either A, girls won't enjoy the games if they didn't dumb them down, or B, know the difference because this will probably be the only video game they play. Here's the sad part about it. Guess one of the genres that does attract a female crowd to more traditional PC and console games? RPGs. What study do I use to back this up? Just my own analytics on YouTube. Whenever I do a video on Kingdom Hearts or the Tales game series and share it online to their groups bent towards these games, I have the amount of women viewing my channel go up several percentage points. Don't get me wrong, it's still a male-dominated genre, but you do have 15 to 20% female users of an already niche genre. You don't need to dumb this game down. It makes the game suck for everybody. And while a lot of good RPGs has plenty of monster killing to level up, they also involve strategy, resource management, story, group and team building, and bonding with characters. Things that will attract a more female audience. So yeah, this mindset screwed up a game that even with its problems could have at least been charming if the gameplay was halfway decent. Yeah, again, not a Super Nintendo game, nor is it early in the PlayStation 1 lifespan. Why are we still using 2D sprites, and why are we having repeated artwork in all of the villages and cities you visited? I can understand the use of 2D sprites if they were trying to go either old school or be really artistic with them, but they're not, and when you repeat your assets again and again, that just reeks of laziness. By the time this game was made, there was no need to repeat assets as much as you do in this game. And again, this would be acceptable in a game made 10 years earlier, because you needed to do that in order to save memory on a very space limited cartridge, but not in the year 2000. You had cheaply made CDs that offered way more memory than the old Nintendo cartridges did. Again, this whole game reeks of laziness. The only time the game does something cool is when you enter the castle town and you get a little bit more scrolling when she enters this huge crowd. It's the only time where I felt the developers really gave a damn about how this game looks. Yes, the songs all suck. I've already covered this. But how is the rest of the soundtrack? It's actually pretty decent for the most part. My only complaint is what there isn't much. For something that calls itself a musical adventure, you would think you get more music, but nope. Same theme for every town, a generic dungeon theme, and a generic battle theme repeated, and it does get old. Fortunately, it's good enough not to get too old too fast. But this game took 7 hours to complete, and I was already sick of its music before it was done. It does say something about this game's soundtrack and why this game has some real big problems. Rhapsody, a musical adventure, should be congratulated on trying something different, trying to make a JRPG narrative into a musical. But it fails in doing that and does so in ways that aren't spectacular but are miserable. The songs are just miserable to listen to if you're over the age of 6. The story doesn't get you invested for the most part. The gameplay is so easy that it becomes a boring slog to get through. Dungeons are forgettable, and there's nothing in the game's graphics that help draw you in. It's a failure all the way around. Not the worst JRPG I have ever played, but since I can't afford a capture card for my DS and I would rather be castrated before I played the likes of Inuyasha for the Nintendo DS, you won't be hearing me talk about the worst JRPG I've ever completed, so accept this number 2. Anyways, folks, thanks for listening to this review. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. And I would love to have you guys as a subscriber to my channel. I'll see you guys later.